Amy Coney Barrett stood at the heart of the Supreme Court chamber, her black robe a stark contrast to the rich mahogany woodwork of America's highest court, her heart pounding with a mix of resolve and quiet indignation. Just moments before, Chief Justice John Roberts had turned his steely gaze on her, his voice laced with a cold edge as he declared, "Perhaps Justice Barrett, given her limited experience, might consider recusing herself from this constitutional interpretation." A stunned silence gripped the room, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. Seasoned court observers froze, their breaths shallow, eyes wide with disbelief at the unprecedented public challenge from the Chief Justice to the court's newest member. A challenge that felt like a dagger to Barrett's hard-earned place on the bench. Her chest tightened, but her resolve hardened. What unfolded in the next 2 minutes left the entire courtroom breathless, hearts racing, and may forever reshape the power dynamics of the Supreme Court for decades to come. With a few meticulously chosen words, delivered with a fire burning beneath her calm exterior, Barrett was about to transform Roberts's dismissive attack into the most humiliating misstep of his judicial career. A moment that would echo with both triumph and reckoning. Before we dive into this heart-stirring tale of judicial confrontation, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more breaking coverage of America's most powerful institutions. These stories, pulsing with raw emotion and high stakes, won't surface in mainstream media. To grasp the searing weight of this historic clash, we must explore who these judicial titans are and why this moment holds such profound, gut-wrenching importance for every American. Chief Justice John Roberts, appointed by President George W. Bush in 2005, has served over 15 years as America's top judge. His polished Harvard education and establishment credentials, a shield he's wielded with pride. He's carefully crafted an image as a measured centrist, a guardian of institutions, but beneath his composed exterior simmers a calculating legal mind, one that thrives on control and preserving what critics scorn as the Washington status quo. In recent years, his decisions to side with liberal justices on pivotal cases involving healthcare and immigration have left conservatives seething with betrayal, their frustration palpable, while Roberts's calculated moves reveal a man desperate to maintain his grip on the court's direction. Amy Coney Barrett, by contrast, embodies a newer conservative wave. Her appointment by President Trump in 2020, following the passing of liberal icon Ruth Bader Ginsburg, thrusting her into a crucible of scrutiny. A former Notre Dame law professor and federal appellate judge, Barrett brought impeccable credentials, but also a heart full of faith as a devout Catholic and mother of 7. She's endured relentless attacks, her critics' barbs cutting deep as they question whether her faith might taint her judicial reasoning. Yet, despite the harsh spotlight that threatened to break her spirit, Barrett has held fast, her calm, methodical approach a quiet rebellion against those who doubted her strength. For Barrett, this confrontation was more than a defense of her qualifications. It was a fiery test of her very identity, her chance to prove herself as an intellectual force on a court where seniority often dictates influence, and to silence the voices that had whispered she didn't belong. Her pulse quickened as she felt the weight of the millions of Americans who had rallied behind her confirmation, their hopes resting on her shoulders. This moment would reveal whether their trust in her unyielding resolve was justified, and the thought of letting them down sent a jolt of determination through her veins. The stakes could hardly be higher, with a critical constitutional question at issue that could shape religious freedom cases for generations, a question that struck at the core of Barrett's beliefs. Roberts, sensing Barrett's rising influence among the court's conservative wing, had chosen this moment to publicly challenge her standing, his unease palpable as he sought to reassert his dominance. The entire legal community watched, hearts in their throats, knowing this exchange would reverberate far beyond the marble columns of the Supreme Court. A clash that felt like the collision of two unyielding forces. The tension had been simmering earlier that morning during oral arguments in the case of Fulton versus City of Philadelphia, a crucial religious freedom dispute that carried the weight of deeply held convictions. Barrett had posed several penetrating questions, her voice steady, but her eyes alight with passion, as she hinted at a new framework for analyzing First Amendment religious claims. A framework that might redefine constitutional interpretation and honor the values she held dear. Roberts, who prided himself on steering the court's direction, grew visibly uneasy, his jaw tightening as Barrett's questioning revealed a depth of constitutional understanding that even seasoned attorneys found awe-inspiring. The first spark of conflict flared when Barrett cited an obscure 1887 precedent that clashed with the approach Roberts had been advocating in similar cases, her words a quiet but firm challenge to his authority. "Justice Barrett," Roberts interrupted, his voice sharp, with a barely concealed edge of irritation. "The court has long moved beyond that antiquated reasoning." Barrett nodded respectfully, but a flicker of defiance crossed her face as she pressed on with her line of questioning, her heart racing with the knowledge that she was stepping into uncharted territory. Several journalists in the press gallery exchanged glances, their pulses quickening as they sensed the unusual friction between the Chief Justice and the newest Associate Justice. As the session drew to a close, Justice Samuel Alito built on Barrett's earlier point, suggesting her analysis offered a more textually faithful reading than the established framework, a moment that filled Barrett with a quiet surge of pride. Roberts's face tightened, his discomfort now a visible storm as he realized other justices were rallying to Barrett's perspective, threatening the control he so fiercely guarded. It was then that Roberts made his calculated move, during the justices' post-argument conference where they privately deliberate on cases. When Barrett began outlining her position, her voice steady but infused with conviction, Roberts cut her off, his tone dripping with dismissiveness. "We have established procedures for interpreting these clauses," he said, his words sharp enough to sting. Witnesses later reported the harshness in his voice felt like a slap, a rare crack in the court's facade of collegiality. "This court has carefully developed these standards over decades," he continued, speaking over Barrett as she tried to respond. An extraordinary breach that left her momentarily reeling, her cheeks flushing with a mix of frustration and resolve. Justice Clarence Thomas, the court's most senior associate justice, raised his eyebrows, a flicker of concern in his stoic gaze, but he remained silent. The tension erupted into the public session that afternoon during discussion of a different case, the air thick with anticipation. Roberts delivered what seemed a premeditated remark, his eyes locking onto Barrett with a cold intensity that made her stomach twist. Perhaps Justice Barrett, with her limited experience, might want to recuse herself from this constitutional interpretation. After all, these complex frameworks were developed while she was still teaching law school basics. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom, the sound echoing like a thunderclap. Never in recent memory had a Chief Justice so openly challenged a colleague's competence in open court, and the sting of his words cut Barrett to her core. Court artists frantically sketched the scene, capturing the tension that crackled like lightning as Justice Sonia Sotomayor, though ideologically opposed to Barrett, shifted uncomfortably, her expression a mix of unease and empathy at Roberts's breach of protocol. Barrett sat perfectly still, her expression a mask of composure, but inside a storm of emotions raged, humiliation, anger, and an unshakable determination to prove her worth. Roberts continued, suggesting her newcomer perspective might benefit from more observation before active participation, each word a barb that fueled her resolve. Justice Brett Kavanaugh glanced at Barrett with concern, his eyes reflecting a quiet solidarity, while Justice Elena Kagan studiously examined her notes, her discomfort palpable as she distanced herself from Roberts's unprecedented display. As Roberts finished his remarks, the courtroom fell into a heavy silence, the air thick with unspoken tension. All eyes turned to Barrett, the weight of their gazes pressing down on her like a physical force. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat a reminder of the stakes, as court observers held their breath, wondering how she would respond to this direct challenge from the nation's top jurist, a challenge that felt like a personal betrayal of the court's sacred collegiality. Amy Coney Barrett straightened the papers before her, her hands steady despite the storm within, and took a deep, measured breath, the fire in her soul igniting as she met the Chief Justice's gaze with unwavering resolve. Her voice, calm yet resonant with an undercurrent of steely determination, filled the hushed chamber, each word a testament to her unshakable spirit. "Thank you, Chief Justice Roberts, for your concern about my experience," she began, her tone respectful but edged with a quiet ferocity that sent a ripple through the room. "I believe my years teaching constitutional law have indeed prepared me for this role, just as your time in private practice prepared you for yours." The reference was precise and cutting, a subtle but searing reminder that Roberts had never served as a judge before his appointment as Chief Justice. While Barrett brought years of judicial experience, her words a quiet defiance that made Roberts's eyes narrow with unease. Barrett pressed on, her voice steady, but her eyes burning with conviction. "However, I think we might all benefit from examining the actual text of the Constitution on this matter, rather than relying solely on frameworks that have evolved over time." She reached for a small worn copy of the Constitution she keeps with her during all court sessions, her fingers brushing the cover with a reverence that spoke of countless hours of study and devotion. Without consulting notes, she quoted precisely from 5 different sections, her voice rising with passion as she connected them with clarity and insight, each word a testament to her profound love for the document that shaped her life's work. "And perhaps most relevant to our discussion today," Barrett added, her tone swelling with quiet triumph, "is this original understanding of the First Amendment's religious protections, which James Madison outlined in his 1789 address to Congress." She recited word for word Madison's statement, a complex passage spanning nearly a paragraph, her voice unwavering, her heart swelling with pride as several legal scholars present later confirmed her recitation was flawless, a moment that filled her with a fierce sense of vindication. "In light of these foundational texts," Barrett concluded, her voice now a powerful blend of resolve and quiet fury, "I must respectfully disagree with the characterization that faithfulness to original meaning represents inexperience rather than judicial discipline." The courtroom remained absolutely silent, the air electric with the weight of her words. Justice Thomas, known for his silence during oral arguments, nodded visibly, a rare glimmer of admiration in his eyes that warmed Barrett's heart. Justice Kagan looked up from her notes, a new respect shining through her expression despite their ideological differences, a silent acknowledgement that stirred a flicker of hope in Barrett's chest. But she wasn't finished. In her most devastating move, she referenced a law review article Roberts himself had written early in his career, her voice now carrying a sharp edge of righteous indignation as she turned his own words against him. "As a young attorney, you eloquently wrote that the court's highest duty is fidelity to the text above all institutional considerations," Barrett noted, quoting Roberts's own words from 35 years earlier, her tone a quiet rebuke that made his face pale. "I have always admired that perspective, and I'm simply attempting to honor it in my service to this court and the Constitution," she finished, her voice trembling slightly with the intensity of her conviction. Justice Alito unsuccessfully suppressed a smile, a spark of amusement in his eyes that mirrored the quiet triumph swelling in Barrett's chest. Roberts, for perhaps the first time in his tenure as Chief Justice, appeared utterly at a loss for words, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by a stunned silence that spoke volumes of his inner turmoil. The man known for his verbal agility and quick thinking sat frozen, his face a mask of shock and reluctant admiration, the sting of his miscalculation burning deep. A veteran Supreme Court reporter would later describe it as the most elegant evisceration of a Chief Justice in the modern era, a moment that filled Barrett with a quiet, fierce pride. Without raising her voice or showing any sign of anger, she had systematically dismantled Roberts's attack, her heart soaring as she established her intellectual dominance on the constitutional questions at hand, proving to herself and the world that she belonged. Roberts finally spoke, his voice strained. "Thank you, Justice Barrett, for that comprehensive response," he managed, the confidence he once exuded now a distant memory, as he grappled with the weight of his misstep. "The court will take all perspectives under advisement," he added, but the words felt hollow, a feeble attempt to reclaim the authority he had lost. Everyone present understood what had just occurred, the air buzzing with a mixture of awe and disbelief. In less than 3 minutes, Amy Coney Barrett had transformed from the court's newest member to perhaps its most formidable constitutional mind, her heart pounding with a mix of exhilaration and relief as she realized the magnitude of her triumph. She had achieved this not through emotional outbursts or political posturing, but through a display of sheer legal brilliance that could not be dismissed, a brilliance that felt like a vindication of every sacrifice she had made to reach this moment. The repercussions of the Barrett-Roberts exchange reverberated far beyond the Supreme Court chamber, a tidal wave of emotion and consequence. Within hours, legal blogs were dissecting every word and nuance of the confrontation, their analyses charged with admiration and shock. The hashtag Barrett Brilliance began trending nationwide, law students and constitutional scholars dissecting her masterful response with a fervor that matched Barrett's own passion, their words a balm to the wounds of doubt she had carried. By evening, clips of the exchange had amassed over 5 million views across social platforms, with constitutional experts from across the political spectrum weighing in on the moment's significance, their voices a chorus of respect that filled Barrett with a quiet gratitude. Inside the marble halls of the Supreme Court, the atmosphere transformed overnight, the air now charged with a newfound reverence for the junior justice who had stood her ground. Court insiders reported that following the session, Justice Clarence Thomas approached Barrett, his typically stoic demeanor softened by a rare warmth as he quietly said, "That was long overdue," his words a lifeline that steadied her trembling heart. Thomas was seen smiling broadly as they walked together toward their chambers, a moment of camaraderie that felt like a victory in itself. Justice Alito reportedly told a clerk that Barrett's response would be taught in law schools for generations, his words a spark of pride that ignited a fire in her soul. Even Justice Sotomayor, ideologically distant from Barrett, was overheard telling her law clerks that the exchange underscored the importance of deep constitutional knowledge, her grudging respect a quiet acknowledgement that eased the sting of past divisions. The following morning, legal reporters noted that Roberts arrived at his chambers earlier than usual, his face etched with a quiet unease as he carried an unusual number of constitutional history texts, a man wrestling with the weight of his own misjudgment. A court employee revealed that the Chief Justice had requested the complete writings of James Madison from the Library of Congress, a clear sign he was revisiting the foundational texts Barrett had cited with such effortless grace, his actions a silent admission of her impact that filled her with a complex mix of vindication and empathy. Perhaps most significantly, the dynamic within the court itself seemed permanently altered, a shift that sent a ripple of hope through Barrett's heart. At the next public session 2 days later, Roberts was seen consulting with Barrett before the arguments began, leaning toward her with a deference that felt hard-won, a quiet acknowledgement of her strength that eased the lingering ache of his earlier dismissal. The Chief Justice, once so careful to preserve his own authority, now appeared to recognize Barrett as an intellectual force he could no longer sideline, a realization that brought her a quiet satisfaction. When Barrett spoke during oral arguments that day, her voice steady with newfound confidence, the Chief Justice did not interrupt once, a marked change from previous sessions that felt like a small but significant victory. During the Justices' closed-door conference that afternoon, sources close to the court reported an extraordinary development that sent a thrill through Barrett's veins. Roberts actually asked her to explain her view of a complex jurisdictional question before offering his own opinion, an unprecedented act of deference to the court's most junior member. Justice Kagan was reportedly stunned by this reversal of typical court protocol, which usually adheres to strict seniority lines, her wide-eyed expression a mirror to the quiet astonishment Barrett felt. Legal analysts quickly noted changes in the court's operations, each shift a testament to the impact of her stand. Barrett was assigned to write the majority opinion in 2 major cases the following week, an extraordinary responsibility for the most junior justice that filled her with a surge of pride and purpose. Sources close to the court suggested that Roberts, seeking to mend the rift his words had caused, had granted these assignments as a tacit acknowledgement of Barrett's constitutional expertise, a gesture that softened the edges of her lingering hurt. Even more tellingly, Barrett's constitutional framework began appearing in draft opinions circulated by other justices, including a partial concurrence from Justice Barrett that adopted elements of her textual analysis, a moment that made her heart swell with the realization that her voice was truly being heard. The media reaction split predictably along ideological lines, yet with a shared undercurrent of awe that transcended politics. Conservative outlets celebrated Barrett's moment as a vindication of their support for her confirmation, their headlines brimming with pride. "Barrett proves her critics wrong," declared Fox News, while the National Review proclaimed, "Constitutional brilliance silences doubters," words that echoed the fierce determination she had felt in that moment. One prominent conservative commentator observed with a tone of reverence, "Barrett just showed the establishment why outsiders sometimes make the most formidable insiders," a sentiment that resonated deep within her, a reminder of the journey she had undertaken. Within legal circles, discussion of the confrontation dominated every conversation, the air buzzing with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. The prestigious American Constitutional Society, generally aligned with progressive jurisprudence, dedicated its monthly newsletter to analyzing Barrett's constitutional approach, a recognition that filled her with a quiet sense of validation. At Yale Law School, professors reportedly adjusted their constitutional law syllabus to include a section on Barrett's textualist methodology, titled New Perspectives on Original Meaning, a development that brought a smile to her lips as she imagined the next generation of lawyers inspired by her stand. More surprising was the reaction from traditionally liberal legal scholars, their grudging respect a balm to the wounds of past criticism. Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz, often critical of Trump-appointed justices, acknowledged on CNN with a tone of reluctant admiration, "Regardless of one's jurisprudential philosophy, Justice Barrett's command of constitutional text and history is extraordinary." His words a quiet victory that eased the ache of past battles. On MSNBC's legal analysis program, a panel of progressive legal experts admitted with a mix of awe and frustration that Barrett's response revealed a jurist of remarkable intellectual capacity, their acknowledgement a testament to the undeniable power of her performance. In the New York Times, a prominent progressive constitutional scholar wrote with a tone of begrudging respect that Barrett's textual approach, while leading to outcomes he often disagreed with, was applied with remarkable consistency and scholarly depth, a piece that Barrett read with a quiet sense of triumph, her heart swelling with the knowledge that her voice had transcended ideological divides. A week after the confrontation, an unexpected development stirred a wave of emotion within her. Justice Kagan cited Barrett's framework during oral arguments, her voice tinged with respect as she suggested, Justice Barrett's attention to textual specificity might offer clarity in this instance. Court observers noted this as perhaps the clearest indication that Barrett's influence had transcended ideological lines, a moment that filled her with a profound sense of hope and unity, a reminder that her stand had not only defended her honor, but had begun to reshape the court's very soul.